Natasha Smith is a wife, mother, and writer from North Carolina. Her work has appeared at Her View from Home, Focus on the Family, and Today Parents. You can find Natasha online at IamNatashaSmith.com. In her new book, Can You Just Sit With Me? Healthy Grieving for the Losses in Life, she writes, give yourself permission to grieve. Tears streamed like water piercing through a broken dam. Days, months, and years prior, I hid my sadness like a game of hide and seek. If you asked me about it, maybe I would share a cookie cutter response. Everything's fine. But 2020 brought quarantine. My routine thrown out the window, kids 24/7, and homeschool. During that time, the grief knocked harder. Mom, what's wrong? My 5-year-old's voice sounded pinched. It's my sister's birthday and I'm sad because I can't celebrate it with her. Nothing new had happened. My sister had been gone for over 9 years. But 2020 made the grief unbearable to me. When I cried, my 5-year-old consoled me. It's okay, Mama. It's okay. She grabbed my arm. Unknown to her, she was permitting me to grieve. So I sat at my desk instead of running to the other room, and I cried right there. She asks, have you ever bottled up your sadness? Ooh. Have you ever hidden your tears, pain, or grief? Have you ever avoided questions about your loss? Have you ever thought no one cares? Me too. Maybe you are waiting for permission to grieve. Is permission needed to grieve? What role does culture, family, and upbringing play in the way you grieve? How do you permit yourself to grieve? In my conversation with Natasha today, I sincerely cannot wait to bring some hope and perhaps even answers to those questions. Grief is all around us. It's in the atmosphere in this post-pandemic world in which we live. So grab a pencil, paper, cup of something delicious, as you know we like to do here, and set some time aside to perhaps allow your heart and perhaps to give your heart the permission it needs to grieve. Hello and welcome to today's Heartlift. We have with us, as I have said already, Natasha Smith, who I've now been given permission to call Tasha. And she's just a beautiful human. And I'm so excited to have her with us today to talk about a subject that perhaps we have not really delved into. We touched upon it here and there, of course. We've talked about pain and loss, but we're going to really dive into what healthy grieving looks like. And Tasha's going to offer us a biblical grief model. Her new book, and the title I just told her was what took my breath away. Can you just, and that word just, we've talked about that word just here quite a bit. And I want to know why you put just in there, but can you just sit with me? Tasha, that title. Did you come up with that? I always ask this because I know I have a lot of women, men in my community who really want to publish their books. And so I love to talk about the author side of this for a minute.
Yes. First, thank you so much again for just allowing me to sit with you today and to talk about this subject. But yeah, can you just sit with me? I came up with that title, and it was
One.
birthed out of 2020.
Okay, tell us more.
Yep. So birth out of 2020. And to me, I've been on this journey, grief journey, for over 30 plus years, like over half of my life.
Oh, wow.
And but 2020 was the catalyst of like, this feels like grief. Like
Mm,
everywhere you turn, there was dead bodies, there
yes.
was
Yes.
racial
Hmm.
injustice, political year, political
Really
divide,
bad.
and
Hmm.
it was everywhere. Like you could not escape it. You couldn't even escape it in the church. And so,
Exactly. Oh, thank you for saying that, because that is
yeah,
the absolute truth.
yeah. So it was just so dark. And I said, having been grieving for so long and really stuffing it and not have dealt with it, 2020 was like, okay, this is
Mhm.
grief and you've been feeling this. And I could not escape it because we're confined to our homes on top of that.
We sure as heck were. Don't you remember? I remember the moment I was actually sitting right here,
Oh,
and the governor's report in Virginia came up and said you can't leave your house until June 16th. And I thought, that's a joke, right?
right?
I think it's like the end of March or beginning of April. And I thought, oh,
Yeah. It
right.
was,
So we
it was,
were confined to be refined, is how
yeah.
I feel.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
powerful. And
I
so,
think it's so true. At
yeah.
least in my life, it was like a journey into the wilderness.
Yes.
Here are all the things you have used busy to cover.
Ah,
Mhm.
yep.
I take it all
Exactly
away.
true. And
Church,
oh, all the things.
all the things,
Mm-hmm.
trappings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here you are.
Mm-hmm.
Your words say dark, hopeless,
Yeah.
full of desperation and despair.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. And all of a sudden, the
Yeah.
dam breaks.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
Hmm.
then so the dam breaks and but no one's listening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Heartlifter, I know. I know that I know that I know. Somebody or somebodies are going, uh-huh, yep. I'm right there right now. Nobody's listening. Okay. Why did you feel that way? I'm so curious.
Yeah. I think the combination of my own grief and
Hmm.
then what was happening in our world at the time. So in my own grief, up until this time, seriously, I didn't feel like I had a safe place to talk about my grief and that anyone really cared to listen,
Yeah, really listen.
really listen.
Like, take a seat and can you just sit with me? Listen.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, um had listened to one of your podcast episodes and learned a new term, spiritual bypassing.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
And I said, wow, I'd experienced it, but hadn't put a word to it.
I know. I'm so
And
grateful. I don't know who coined it. I don't think I know. If I do, I don't remember. But I'm so deeply grateful that
yeah,
we now have a vernacular. We have the words to put around what you felt, what I have felt for sure.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that was
Everything's
kind of
fine.
what,
It's all good. Praise the Lord. Hmm.
yeah, praise
Oh,
the Lord.
sister, just praise him, dig deep,
Yeah,
let not your heart be troubled.
exactly.
This too shall
Yeah,
pass. Yeah.
yeah. So that was what I was experiencing. So I didn't feel like I had a space to really express how I was really feeling. And
Mm,
so that paired with, again, what was happening in our culture, no one was listening to anyone.
I know.
Like everyone was speaking, quote unquote, their truth,
Mhm.
but they weren't listening or cared to listen to what other people had to say, how they may have been feeling, how things may have deeply affected them. I'm like, what is going on? Can you just sit? Can you just sit with
Yes.
me? Not to
Yes.
not to interject your opinion, but to really hear my heart.
And to debate, because my mother died in August of 2020. So in
Oh,
assisted living, early in, hopeless, first one to pass in her assisted living, couldn't be with her,
oh,
couldn't go to the ER, it was just couldn't be there. Just absolutely, ugh.
I'm so sorry.
I know, but God was there. I know he was. I know he was
Yeah,
with her, and he orchestrated all of those events. I have to believe that in
yeah,
my
it's
grief
true.
my grief process.
Mhm.
And I think what I felt so frustrated with is what you're saying and bringing to the table is that I don't want to hear your political views on all of this.
Yes.
Just go in. Like I had so many people say, just storm the gates of the ER. I'm like, there are policemen outside. Friends. I don't really think I can do that. And then my children were like, Mom, you can't. We can't
Right.
afford to lose you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's like, you probably could have named it. Can you just listen to me?
Oh, yeah.
Can you just sit with me? I think both of those
Yeah.
are very appropriate. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Mhm. Mhm.
So here we go. We're on your journey. Somebody just sit with me. How
Yeah.
did you deal with that? I mean, it provoked anger in me, frustration, confusion, deconstruction of my faith, if I'm honest. You know, how did you cope with that, if I could ask you that?
Mhm. I feel what I've learned is grief needs a place to go.
Woo!
It has to go somewhere.
Yeah,
And as I kind of mentioned earlier on, I would stuff it, push it aside, but it just bubbled up. I mean,
it
I
does.
could not push it down any longer.
I know. It
And
just kind
so,
of,
right, it's just right there, and it needs a place to go. And at the time, I still didn't have like a safe place, like a safe community to really express. And so I
wow.
started writing.
You wrote a book.
I wrote a book. I'm like,
Exactly.
what?
What? I gotta get it out of me. Good girl. Bravo. Bravo. I'm so proud.
Thank you.
Have you always wanted to write? Is writing been a therapeutic practice in your life? No. Hmm.
No, the craziest thing. No, I'm an engineer by degree. I spent
Oh, I
like
envy that
12,
left brain. Oh,
right?
I do. I
12
envy it.
years in 12 years I spent at my career as an engineer in the pharma industry, and then God
Wow.
called me to homeschool
Oh boy. Woohoo.
7 years
Like
ago.
before COVID?
Yeah, before COVID.
Okay, me too. That's part of my journey. Yep,
Yeah.
homeschooled for 14 years. Yeah, I'm like, excuse
Oh.
me, I have things to do. Called you to homeschool before 2020.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's a massive transition. That's a whole nother podcast. Yes.
Massive. Yeah,
Yep.
it's a little pocket in the book.
Okay. Go ahead and share then. I'd love to. In
Yeah.
what chapter? I don't have a physical copy because
Yeah.
it's not out yet. It doesn't come out till September 26th. Oh, I am an impatient woman right now. But you can pre-order it,
Yeah.
Heartlifters, which, I always tell you that's a mass boost authors. So you can pre-order that. And when you go to look at it on Amazon or wherever you find your books, you can see the chapter titles. So which chapter is that transition story part of?
Yeah, so that story is going to be found in chapter 10, A
Oh,
Revealing Grief.
oh,
Mhm.
I wasn't going to go there.
Mm,
Hmm. A revealing grief.
mm.
Tasha. Okay. Would you share more?
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh.
So part of that journey, that transition from being in corporate America to homeschooling, I felt the call so strong. I mean, I've never had a thought about, homeschooling or that being a part of our family. And I felt that call, and my husband jumped on board. It's like, God said it. We're gonna do this. And
Wow.
yeah, so that was like, yeah, this is God.
I think you're in
And
your schoolroom if I'm looking around. Once you get on
I
YouTube and
am.
watch, I'm like, welcome. Okay, math. Love it. Just brings back so many memories.
Oh,
And now I'm
that's
a
so
grandma.
sweet.
And I said, I will never homeschool my grandchildren. But once I spent time with them, I'm like, oh, I think I would.
Oh, so sweet. I love
It's
it.
just like, I don't know. It just all came flooding back. Okay. So you're called to homeschool. Woo. Left corporate America.
Yeah. And so I'm starting this thing, and it's new, of course. And I start to, because I was in a public school.
Mhm.
And so it was challenging to me because I was like, how do I do
You
this?
think?
This transition. But what surprised me most was that I was grieving. What
Wow.
I left, even though I have made the decision to leave my
Sure.
career, oh my gosh, it was
Hmm.
the hardest thing. And I still,
Okay.
even to this day, 7 years, almost 8 years later, I'm still challenged with that at
Oh,
times.
yeah. Um, if I can interject, I am
Yeah.
63.
Yeah.
Like I said, moving on to the legacy dream that I've dreamed of,
Yeah.
since the beginning of my marriage 39 years ago. And I think there are so many times I just said it to my husband yesterday. I mean, do you think I should have stayed in teaching so I could have a retirement? And right. So I think, yeah, I don't, okay. So what you're saying to us though, this is like a revealing grief for the transitions, the losses, which is what I love that you're covering in this book. Grief on all sides, like the prism of grief can be a prism of pain, loss, transition. Okay. How did
Yeah.
you manage that revealing grief?
Mhm. Having really to go before the Lord and Him helping me to see what
Mm,
He had already seen in me before the foundations of the world, truly. It's
mm,
really just grasping and finding that identity in Him. Because what I'm
mm.
finding is, as I'm moving through life, and I may have these different, uh, maybe I'll call them attachments, or
Yeah,
labels that
yeah.
we bring on, because even homeschool mom, so I'm getting
Oh,
more comfortable in this,
it's
and
my identity, man.
but then I'm feeling like, okay, so I have my oldest daughter, she's a junior, and she's going to be graduating next year. And so I'm like, okay, I'm already starting to feel this next transition.
Yes.
And
How old's your
so
baby?
the baby is 7.
No. Woo, you've got the expanse. Okay.
Yes. And so I'm still, I'm even now starting to feel this little tug, like, okay,
Mhm.
this is will be another season of letting go. But
Mhm.
what I've found is the more that I attach my identity to who I am in Christ, it's going to give
Yeah.
me a surer footing and
Mhm.
foundation as we go through these transitions in life.
Mhm.
And so
Exactly.
that has been more of the stability I'm
Yes.
finding.
I call it like a prophetic footing. What
Uh,
am I standing on? What's my
yes.
footing for this?
Mhm. Mhm.
What is when everything else around me is shifting, it is
Mhm.
that solid ground that I stand on. And that is up to you. So I'm hearing here that I feel like you've learned the power of expression rather than repression. Is
Yeah.
that the journey you would say that you repressed your
Yeah.
grief, you said for 30 years?
Yeah. Mhm.
So your journey, all of this therapeutic writing, all of this observation that you are doing with the world around you, you're now wanting to be that voice. And in this community, we equate voice with value, worth, and dignity.
Mhm.
Prophetic footing is on I have value, worth, and dignity. I have no attachment other than to Christ himself, which is a daily work, is what you're doing.
Yes.
But it's fair to say that you now want to be that voice to help all of us express instead of repress.
Absolutely.
So 30 years is a long time,
It
a
is.
very long time. I know that heartlifters want to know where your journey of grief started. It
Mhm.
was 30 years ago.
Yeah. So it started with a miscarriage.
Oh, yes. I've had that. That's so hard.
It started with a miscarriage, and
Mm.
and that journey, I was so young. I was actually in my teens. I was a teenager.
Wow, Natasha.
Yeah. So it started there, and then I- it's
Mm.
it's so expansive.
Yeah.
Let me tell you this story. That's
Okay.
it's kind of a part of this story.
Is this full story in the book or just a part of it?
This one is
Okay.
just a part of it.
Okay.
Because the book does have story after story, and it goes in quite some detail. But this story is, I recently started seeing a counselor.
Ooh, big move.
Big move.
Big move. Look at your face. You're like, big move.
Yeah. And so 3 sessions in,
Ooh.
she asked if she could take a break.
Oh. Wow. She
Because it was
needed a break.
she needed a break
Okay.
because it was a bit much for her. And we started doing a timeline of my grief.
Oh, good. Oh, wow.
Started with that. Um, and we only made it through high school.
And this is post book writing?
Post book writing.
What?
Yes, let me tell you that. Yeah. Post book writing. Because before, like I said, 30 years, I haven't done any grief work. 2020 was like, boom, you need to do something. You got, get the grief out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote, and then this is after like all of my edits are turned in. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I need to see someone.
This is so relevant and powerful. And even for those of us who just therapeutically write,
Yeah.
expressive writing, they call it, just get it on paper. You may never write a book, but
Yeah.
you are writing your book when you're writing this journal and you're processing. But even in my own history of work with the 3 books that I have, the work came post writing for most of them. Still, okay, that's good on paper. Now it's time for me. Yeah, it like opens the door to a
Yes.
greater expansion of your capacity. So, okay, she needs a break. What on earth? That's amazing.
It was so free. I felt super affirmed. Like,
Uh-huh. Sure. Like, okay, good. You think it's a lot too.
right. Exactly.
Woo, I'm not crazy.
Exactly.
I know. I can get that for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Yes. All right. Very affirming. How long was that break? 5 minutes? 3 weeks?
Right. Several weeks.
My goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what was your response to that? Just the affirmation or just like, okay,
Well, it was kind of the same. I mean, I was kind of feeling how she was feeling myself, because it's a lot.
It
And
is.
it's pretty much because I have had a succession of loss after loss, and
Okay.
so it's kind of like when I start to think about one loss, another one occurred.
Yes. Yes.
And so it was so hard to really unpack one of those.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so,
Sorry.
and no, you could. And so,
Like, I know.
and so as I was speaking with her, or we had met like the previous couple of sessions, and we had started kind of not even really unpacking, but just kind of talking about the timeline. I mean, I was already kind of feeling like, oh, maybe I need to kind of maybe think about like one right
Right.
now. Yeah, so had kind of become overwhelming for me too. So we were kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah, we can take a little break.
Yeah, which is a very significant, if anybody listening is a helping professional, mental coach, therapy, whatever, human being.
Yeah.
When you are called to sit with someone, which we all are, just to listen, I think that is, she is good, number one, because I sit with so many people and it's very difficult to say we need to take a break because you feel like you're going to lose the momentum, right? But I have learned the hard way not to keep pushing. So I love that you brought that point up and that you received it well. Okay. So a lot of grief, grief upon grief, loss upon loss. Okay. When you picked that back up, have you picked that back up? I'm just curious. No. Okay.
We started talking
This
about
is
some other
fresh.
things.
You started talking about other things. Okay.
Yeah, other things that could help in, like what's going on currently in life. Because
Mhm.
I've had a nephew who was murdered.
I know. I
And
saw that.
so,
Please tell us if you will. Like this is a
yeah.
fresh, newer. Hmm.
So, a couple of weeks ago was his murder, or no, last week or a couple of weeks ago was his birthday actually. But
Yeah.
it just brought, it
Bring it
birthdays,
back.
death dates, anniversaries, whatever you call them, brings back emotion. So I have felt really strong grief
Mhm.
during that time. And so that's kind of what we focused on, kind of um working through that and processing that, because that one's a little bit more fresher than some
Mhm.
of the other ones. Um,
Yes.
and so that's kind of what we focused on. But surrounding that is just the emotions, because he was murdered, there's still
Yes.
some unresolved anger in the way that he died.
Oh, I am very sure of that. Yes. Yeah. And you also write of losing your sister.
Two sisters.
Two sisters.
Yes.
Goodness.
Yes. The
Hmm.
first one, and what I considered like all of the losses are grief worthy and are major, but this was like when I was freshman year in college or
Hmm.
sophomore year in college, and my older sister passed away when she was 32.
Oh gosh, my twins are 32. Okay.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And at the time, so I'm like later end of teenager, like before my 20s. And I'm like, people die at this age, I'm seriously
Shocking.
like, yes, very shocking.
Shocking.
And I guess the other thing with this one that made it to me so heavy and pronounced is that my family knew that she was had a the doctor had given her a specific
Oh,
length of time
timeline.
to live, but they didn't tell me. Mm.
Yeah. Oh boy.
So, so
So
that
that's
was,
secondary or even
yes.
tertiary processing,
Hmm.
right? Of anger, all the processes of
Oh,
grief.
yeah.
Like, why would you not let us in on
Yeah.
this massive loss? Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. But then my oldest, and so that was my oldest sister. Then my next to the oldest sister passed away 10 years after that. So that was like 98. And then this was 2011
Hmm.
when my next to the oldest sister passed away of cancer. I
Hmm.
still can remember the phone call, like she
Mm-hmm.
was the phone call of her telling me that the doctor had said that she was diagnosed, but it was like a promising outcome, or she had a
Okay.
promising outlook.
Uh-huh.
The doctor had a promising outlook, and I was like, okay, because it was a different kind than
Mm.
my oldest sister. And so, okay, we'll walk through this, And I got off the phone, and I'm like, oh, it just, of course, just stopped me in my tracks, because I'm like, what in the world?
Yes. What
Um,
just happened?
yeah, but literally from that phone call, she died 3 months later.
Oh my. Wow.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so it was just.
Well, I know every one of our Heartlifters has the story,
Mhm.
and I'm really, once again, just grateful that you're here, Tasha, that you're willing to be vulnerable, that you're willing to open your heart and use your voice to help us. So, what do we do?
Yeah.
What do we do when we do get that phone call, when we receive news? What do we do? Where does this process begin? And how are you identifying this biblical grief model? If you could explain that to us and perhaps enlighten us on where to go, where to start.
Mm-hmm. Um, I say start at the feet of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like
Hmm.
really, but really,
Yeah. It's not
you know.
trite. We don't do trite here. And then we really are just taking a deep breath and really our journey, at least the one that I have been on through my wilderness wanderings in this global pandemic, is I've really come to know, thank the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
through lots of moments on this floor back here of
Mm.
weeping and wrestling with who are you really?
Yes.
Who are you, Jesus? Like I've
Yes.
heard thousands of sermons. I've taught thousands of Bible studies and sermons and blah, blah, blah. But now that all the trappings are gone, who the heck am I? Who is my faith? That's where we are. So this is not trite. We are saying you are, I can feel it. I see it on your face. It's start there. Fall apart on the floor,
Right.
pull the car over, do whatever. Okay. So we start at the feet of Jesus. Yes.
And
Very
then,
grounding, by the way.
yeah. And when we're looking, for the book, I bring in a lot of different biblical examples, of
Good.
men and women who have grieved, but and even Job,
Yes.
yeah. But when I really truly thought, like, who is the ultimate example? I'm going to always go back to Jesus, because
Yeah.
Jesus is our ultimate example. And I thought about the WWJD bracelets. What would
Yes.
Jesus do? I'm like, I need to get like some t-shirts.
Yes.
What would Jesus do? So I'm thinking, like, what did Jesus do
What
when
did
he
he do?
grieved?
Mm-hmm.
And so that is kind of how I base this biblical grief model. Is based after what Jesus did. When we take a look at him and what he did, as he grieved, Lazarus, as he grieved
John
over
11.
John the
Yeah.
Baptist. Yeah, and that's where this biblical grief model comes from.
So walk us through that. So he wept.
He wept. Absolutely, he wept. I love that.
Shortest scripture in the whole Bible.
Right.
Jesus
That's
wept,
probably
right?
the first scripture I learned in Sunday school was Jesus wept.
Yes. Exactly. Sword drills. Right.
Yes. And so just again, grief needs a place to go. It's okay with expressing our grief. We're not crazy. Grief is normal. We know this. But showing emotion. So, Jesus invites us and helps us to know that it's okay to cry. It's okay to express emotion. So Jesus wept. And then he went off to a quiet place.
He did. Thank you for bringing that out. Yes. He took the time.
Yeah.
Because you write about that. Repression comes by, like I just was saying, busyness,
Yeah.
just filling in all the quiet places so you don't have to hear anything. Right? I mean, when you sit, your mind starts going. Yeah. So I avoided sitting or being quiet for decades, and then had to train myself in that practice to learn how to hold my thoughts, capture my thoughts, and do all that. So, right. So he took the time, created the space. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely.
Made it a priority.
Right. I love what you said, because I had, looking back, I realized that busy was the thing, my go-to thing. I mean, even in college, because I experienced a loss with my sister in college, I had like 3-4 jobs in college.
Wow.
For no real reason,
You just wanted to keep busy.
Exactly.
Now you can reflect back. I certainly, Lord have mercy, how I have used workaholism to avoid looking at my soul, and doing that soul work. And, and Jesus knew the plan. Like, he knew the plan, right? He knew the delay that was going to happen with Lazarus, but he was overcome. That's what I've learned in that story. He was so overwhelmed because he loved Lazarus and Mary and Martha so much. They were his intimates. He stayed at their house in Bethany, right? That was where he had someone to sit with him. That's how I read that story. Yes. Can someone just sit with me? Oh, I know Mary, Martha, and Lazarus will sit with me. Oh, I think that, because I always say I just want to be that house where Jesus would want to come. Yes. And just sit. And so I could just sit with him. Yeah. And hold space. We call that holding space here. It's so hard to hold space with people, because it takes time, energy, and it takes it away from what we think is important. Right. Or what is valuable in culture, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What we think is valuable in culture is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because we value productivity above all things.
Absolutely.
What'd you do today?
Yeah.
Well, I sat with her
Mm.
for 4 hours. What did you get done? Well, I sat with my friend
Yeah.
for 4 hours. We don't value presence.
Oof.
And you're helping us do that. Okay, so the biblical model, I really want to walk through it.
Yeah.
Is that in a certain chapter? Because I'm not privy to the book.
Yes. Let's see. This is in the chapter Healing Paths.
PAST.
PATHS. Paths.
Healing Path. Oh,
That's chapter 12.
chapter 12. Let me read this. This was on,
Okay.
you wrote this, and I think it is so powerful. Culture influences the way we grieve. This is what you're inviting us into, really looking in our own lives on how we make time, energy, and space for our souls.
Yeah.
Okay. We live in a fast-paced culture that cares about making the world go round and not about how you feel. Oh, I love you. In our culture, there is no time to grieve. Maybe the way our culture brushes over loss and grief causes us to fear how we respond to grief. Yes. I've been in groups where someone became visibly upset with tears, and you could tangibly feel the discomfort in the room. God has given you such insight. Tears or emotions are often unwelcome in most environments. Just think about what is presented across social media, especially. We're inundated with images of happy-go-lucky faces, pretty pictures, and perfectly manicured square spaces, void of any resemblance to the reality of the grief-filled world in which we live. These pictures almost force you to wear a smile. Regardless of your circumstances, your hurt, and your grief, they almost force you to hide your grief. And the most profound thing I read that you wrote is, hold on, right here. Tears are important to God.
Yeah.
They tell stories we can't imagine. Okay. So making the time, the energy, and space, Jesus wept. He took the time and he went away. Continue on with this beautiful model.
Yeah. So Jesus went away. He made space for grief. He cried. He showed emotion. And then Jesus asked questions.
Tell us.
So he's in the garden. Why have you forsaken me? It gives us permission to ask questions, depending on how you grew up, if you have a certain church affiliation or whatever, or culture, you may not feel like you can go to God, go to Jesus to say, I don't know about this, this, and why are you letting this hurt me?
This really sucks. Yeah,
right,
exactly.
It sucks.
Sorry, I'm going to use that word.
Oh yeah. But and it hurts me that we have felt like that, that we can't come to the one who loves us the most and created us to say this, I don't like this. And I have questions. The thing I found is, we have questions. We need to go to the one who has the answers, who is the truth. And he has all the truth and all the answers. And so in this biblical grief model, it's saying it's okay. Jesus has had questions, and we can have questions too, because we can go to our Father who has all the answers.
Yeah, and he actually said, take it away from me.
Right.
I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done. I'm good.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that is the most wonderful permission. I mean, he had a practice of setting aside time in solitude and silence to realign himself with his Father. So I think that's a critical point as well, as we need to have this practice in our lives of collecting strength, of going to the Father, of not just when the loss happens or
Yes.
when the trauma hits, because these are all traumas in your life for
Right. Yeah.
sure. You've
Yeah.
had so much trauma,
Mhm.
and even with a practice in place in the garden, he was like, you need to take this away from me. It's a bit
Right.
much. It's a bit much.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So he moved through that.
Mhm.
So make time, energy, and space. This is
Mhm.
so critical to have. He gave himself the permission to
Yeah.
take the time, energy, and space. And he
Yeah.
had the world's traumas on his shoulder.
Right.
He had the whole responsibility of making things right in this world, right? And yet he took that time and made time and gave himself permission.
Yeah.
Also, he asked questions. And I think, Tasha, affirm me or correct me. That's because he really knew the Father's love for him.
Yes.
Is that true?
It is. Absolutely.
And I think maybe I know myself, and Heartlifters, you've heard me repeat this past year in my life, 2022, was where I discovered the love that God had for me in a way I could not have discovered it if it had not been a traumatic time of loss and grief in my life. And it was right here on this floor, 3 a.m. in the morning, and God brought to me 1 John 4. And Heartlifters, go back to those episodes that I've talked about that, but we have to know, we have to possess the belief in our depths that he loves us so much
Mhm.
that no question we bring to him is going to rock his boat, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I talk about that earlier on in the book because
Okay.
you have to establish that. You have
Yeah.
to establish that he loves us. So
Okay.
exactly what you're saying, like I established that earlier on in the book because that's what's going to carry us through this.
What do you give us then? Add to my conversation. Like, we're not privy to the book yet. We'll have you back when
Yeah.
this book comes out. I'm actually holding a tangible copy if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
But from that introduction, what do you bring to us to understand and receive the love of God? How can we perhaps make some movement towards that?
Mhm.
Not just a head knowledge,
Yeah.
because we say the longest journey is from our head to our heart,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
embodying, like, oh, I know and believe God loves me.
Mhm. I was in like a mentorship type group. It was really kind of like a business group, but it has
Mhm.
like some spiritual notes to it or something. And
Yeah.
the mentor had us, it was interesting, and I feel like it was a God thing, but she brought up like people who had experienced trauma in their lives.
Mm,
And she had us do this exercise to say, think back on, a particular time where you question where God was. Like, God, where were you?
mhm.
And so it's like, okay,
Mm.
I'll try it.
Which one shall I choose
Exactly.
on my timeline of grief?
Yes. But you know what? I did it and it brought me to my knees.